marine CDR today. So you have 4 options: MRV certainty, ecosystem impact, cost curve, and policy ask. Looks like the winner now is MRV certainty. We've reached to the giveaway time. Exciting.
Okay, Frederica.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's great people with me today in one panel because I really wanted to bring the voice not just in the science and climate community, not just as a VC angle, not just in a banking angle, like everyone in the same room. So you actually can figure out what is the best climate tech funding model.
Where can we actually hit gigaton scale? That's how I moved into the ocean. I got convinced that if we're going to do this at the levels that we really need to hit our climate goals, there's really only one place.
What is marine CDR?
I wanted to start at a very high level to put marine carbon dioxide removal in the context of some of the other carbon dioxide removal methods that they are part of this class of durable CDR. So just adding into that class and kind of an extension of that are these ocean methods. And here is a list of just 4 of them. It's actually a whole wide array of different terminologies within even the ocean.
There's a huge range of techniques out there, and actually there's pros, cons to all of them. So something to bear in mind for particularly newcomers to the space.
Which is the salty take or the myth.
Really top of mind for a lot of folks for good reason that MCDR will necessarily harm ecosystems. This is what I would say is a myth, and I'll give you kind of a number of reasons why it's a good thing to be concerned about, but it's also something that there's a lot of folks thinking about it, and there's no reason to think at this point that it's necessarily the case.
Dozens of projects already concluded, currently operational and permitted and kicking off shortly around the world. Right? So we think of this as a really nascent field, and it is, but it's happening. It's happening right now.
To listen to people who have money, which is our investor here, about venture activities.
There have been quite a few deals in ocean carbon capture, quite a few companies who have raised significant, for their stage of maturity, amount of money. Quite a few of these companies are now at the valuation close to 100 million euro.
Put your heart and money on the table that everything you tell me that will happen will happen. There won't be some event that you couldn't plan for.
Let's make climate cool again! What a nice room of people. Thank you so much for coming. First of all, I want to thank everyone to be here in the room with us. The reason why we have this is because I think marine CDR is just such a new field and everyone is fascinated. I'm fascinated of the ocean and how it can help us to achieve the sustainable future. And because there are a lot of different type of pathways. I just wanted to thank Women in Carbon, who's kindly helping me with this event. And they're the institute also for the carbon removal space. And myself, I have a carbon financing venture. I'm trying to help the carbon removal companies to get that financing they want. And one of the things I figured in the past is people in climate are always talking to people in climate forever, and people in banking talking to people in banking forever. This is why I've been doing this last year in small scale, and this is the first bigger scale event that I'm experimenting, like a more dynamic type of event that I hope people can enjoy, not just sit here and hoping to leave. It's my first time trying this format, and I hope that everyone here is co-creating this new format with me. And I want to bring the different voice from people in the scientist community and the finance community together, because we need all the smart minds in the world for us to be able. So then the first Mentimeter, if marine CDR were a music genre, what would it be? Classical, pop, techno. If you finish, just hit the like on the techno. Seems like techno is the trend. And right? Okay, moving on. In one word, how would you describe your feeling about marine CDR? Emerging, curious, unique, nascent, I'm curious exciting. Too. That's why I have this. Last year, I talked to one of the panelists who's kindly on the screen right now, Alicia Kasbeck, about what is marine CDR on my podcast. And then I want to bring that knowledge to people who are around me who's not from a scientist community, who's not an engineer, to have this kind of conversation, which is why I have Fireside chat today. It's a flow, and we have all of the people here We have 3 here in the room with us, and 2 of them are joining from the United States. They're here, Alicia and Grace. Today's flow, we have, I will also give a shout out to Kita, who's kindly sponsors this event. We have, and also Women in Carbon. I would let the panelists to introduce themselves first. So it's 1 sentence of what you do and 1 moment of the first time come across marine CDR. I will start with Sophie.
Thank you, Lydia, and thanks for Women in Carbon and Lydia for inviting us all here today. So I'm Sophie Gill, I'm head of marine science at Isometric. Isometric is a carbon registry. In my role as head of marine science, it's effectively to have oversight for marine carbon removal, measuring, reporting, and verification protocols. So we're aiming to bring a high level of scientific rigor and transparency to how these things are done. I have a background in geology and geochemistry, and I did a PhD looking at the response of plankton to ocean alkalinity enhancement. Our first protocol we released was for ocean alkalinity enhancement, and we will have our first marine carbon removal credits on the registry issued this year, which is really exciting. I first found out about marine science, I can't remember what the point is, moment of the first time I came across this. I guess, as I mentioned, my background is in geology and geochemistry, and actually one of the things that you learn about during those subjects is how the Earth has effectively kind of responded to changes in temperature over the whole of geological history. And I guess I found out about the way that the carbon cycle regulates for these changes in global temperature during that. Effectively, the process of enhanced weathering and ocean alkalinity enhancement is like speeding up the Earth's natural buffer system for dealing with changes in temperature. And I guess that's probably the first time I heard about this. And then the first time I actually heard the words marine carbon dioxide removal were when I saw the project that I ended up doing a PhD for. I saw the proposal. My supervisor had recommended I should look at it because I was interested in doing a PhD. And I was like, this sounds cool. It's pretty wacky. Never did I imagine that like only just over 5 years later, there would be a whole industry that's growing around this subject. So pretty exciting to be here.
Hi, I'm Audrey Goldstein. I work in carbon markets development for Standard Chartered Bank. So my background is not in science, it's finance and commodities more broadly. And so within Standard Chartered, I basically work in a team that aims to develop carbon markets as more of an asset class, something that banks can actually support, help to create to some extent, but basically they become just like in other businesses sectors that banks generally support, one that we can also support. The very first time I came across the concept of marine CDR, I think was actually pretty recent, some year and a half ago. So basically, we were launching capabilities, and we had within the bank, we have a nature team, and one of the first ideas that came is what can we try and do together? The whole report around seagrass and how seagrass just happened that was launched. Out of that, actually came a pretty cool opportunity last year where we supported the government of Bahamas that basically did what is called a nature for debt swap, so they reissue their debt at a lower cost so that the savings can be used towards nature, in that particular case towards the ocean and the economy, and that includes projects around marine CDR, and that was probably how I first came across the concept.
My name is Ola. I work for Siemens Financial Services, which is part of Siemens AG, the Munich-based international company. I'm part of the team that invests in carbon removal, carbon storage, and carbon utilization technologies. It's a relatively new team. We have been around maybe 2.5 years. Before that, I was investing into startups in energy transition space, so kind of much broader space. But when I joined this team about 2.5 years ago, basically we kind of did a pretty big exercise of scoping carbon removal, carbon storage companies, and obviously marine ocean carbon capture came up on the list. And that's basically the first time I came across it, and I was quite impressed with the sheer scale of what that pathway of carbon removal can offer to humanity. given, oceans and basically water, they kind of store about 50 times more carbon than air. So it's kind of the potential of oceans and marine in general is much, much higher than just kind of sucking carbon directly from the air.
Thank you. We can pass the mic to first Grace and then Alicia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Andrews. I'm the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called Hourglass Climate. We work on ocean alkalinity enhancement. We do our own research and partner with for-profits to design and build field trials. And we also build modeling tools that quantify carbon removal and environmental impacts of those trials. My entry into marine CDR was from land. I'm a scientist by background, and I spent a number of years as an academic working on a type of CDR called enhanced rock weathering, which is basically alkalinity enhancement, but in agricultural soils. And it was in doing research in that space that honestly I started getting a little down about the real world scale potential of enhanced rock weathering and started looking around to ask the question, where can we actually hit gigaton scale? And that's how I moved into the ocean. I got convinced that if we're going to do this at the levels that we really need to hit our climate goals, there's really only one place. And so moved into the oceans, and I've been here ever since.
Thanks, Grace. Now it's Alicia.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Alicia Karsbeck. I'm a co-founder and CTO at a nonprofit R&D organization called Seaworthy. Our organization is not unlike Grace's in that we receive philanthropic funding and then a little bit of US federal funding. And we work on developing modeling tools also for ocean alkalinity enhancement and also for direct ocean removal. As Grace pointed out, she's got modeling tools. We have modeling tools. They're very complementary. There's actually a number of modeling tools that are needed for quantifying ocean-based carbon dioxide removal methods. And there's a lot of area in this space for a lot of continued scientific advancements on the modeling front. So in terms of my journey here, I had actually been working in another area called climate intervention, solar climate radiation management. So you may have heard of things like stratospheric aerosol injection or marine cloud brightening. These are methods that we have for doing perturbations to the natural climate system. I was working in that space and started to think more about ocean solutions in that space. And it led me to actually a joint scientific and industry conference. Grace was there actually, where started thinking about and understanding about this. There was an emerging industry within the carbon dioxide removal area. It was perfect for me because my background is as a physical oceanographer. So I come from the space of academic space of modeling the physical behavior of the ocean. And so bringing in some of the biogeochemical components, which are necessary for understanding CDR, was a really exciting and natural extension for me.
Thanks. So it goes next naturally to our next phase, which is the lightning overview of what is marine CDR. And then we have all seen this graph, I think, about different type of pathways in carbon removal. I believe people in this room are very familiar with this. And I'm not going to go into the details. This is a graph that I got it from Ocean Visions about all different kind of marine CDR removal pathways. And now I'm just going to give a little bit of survey of people if you can submit your answers of how familiar are you with marine carbon removal before we dive into the lightning overview. I know a bit, but I'm not an expert. Same here. It's fun, right, this one. Cool. I believe everyone has voted. We're going to pass on to Dr. Alicia to introduce to us what is marine CDR.
Okay, thanks, Lydia. And also, I want to just thank you for dealing with these technical issues, which I know it's hard when people are joining remote, but it's great to be here with you. I wanted to start at a very high level because I know that there's a kind of a mixed audience here to put marine carbon dioxide removal in the context of some of the other carbon dioxide removal methods that people might be more familiar with or more comfortable with. Some of this is just also introducing some of the terminology that we use within carbon dioxide removal space. Most people who are in the carbon dioxide removal space are familiar with what we call conventional CDR. So these are projects like afforestation or reforestation, agricultural management, And people are becoming more familiar with this new class of CDR methods, which we call novel or durable CDR, which usually happens on land. So these are things like direct air capture, enhanced rock weathering, or biochar. What is different about these than conventional CDR is they are understood to actually have to store carbon for a much longer period of time than conventional CDR. So they become more attractive over time because they are part of this class of durable CDR. So just adding into that class and kind of an extension of that are these ocean methods. And here is a list of just 4 of them that I brought up here. There's actually a whole wide array of different terminologies within even the ocean space, but you may have heard now the term ocean alkalinity enhancement, direct ocean removal or direct ocean capture. You can think of it as a kind of a mirror image a bit of what you see with direct air capture in the atmosphere. River alkalinity enhancement does fall into the category of marine because it leverages basically the chemistry of rivers. And then seaweed cultivation, which sometimes we call macroalgae cultivation as well. And there's a few other methods as well. But these fall into this class of durable CDR methods. So here's a nice chart that I think Lydia made for me. I'm just sort of breaking down these different areas. Okay, so just as the final slide, because this is very, very quick, I want to just mention, again, 4 different pathways and to give you a little bit of a framework for organizing in your mind how we think about these pathways within ocean-based carbon dioxide removal. And just to back up, the things that we classify as ocean-based carbon dioxide removal, they all have these qualities which they are either enhancing the ocean's natural ability to take up carbon and or storing actually carbon within the ocean. So again, ocean alkalinity enhancement, this is the idea that it falls under this ocean chemistry pathways. That and direct ocean removal are ones which are leveraging the chemistry of seawater. And then we have class of pathways, which we call the ocean biology pathways. Sometimes we call them biotic pathways. And they are actually leveraging the biological processes within the ocean. So ocean alkalinity enhancement and direct ocean removal have this quality where they are removing CO2 from the ocean and the surface ocean so that there can be more CO2 taken up from the atmosphere. That's actually the mechanism by which the carbon removal from the atmosphere takes place. In the ocean pathways that you'll hear about, these are ones where you're actually leveraging photosynthesis, right? So it's naturally the way that plants actually pull CO2 out of their environment, creating a deficit of CO2 that can then be taken up by the atmosphere. So in all the cases, the thing to keep in mind here is that they all have this property where they are in some way depleting the CO2 in the surface ocean so that more can be taken up by the atmosphere. So let me just stop there because I know we're doing this really quick. But wanted to get those ideas in your mind. I know often seeing these things actually raises a lot of questions. And so if those come up, I'm sure myself or Grace or others would be happy to answer them offline or online.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Alicia. So then we are going into our panel discussion because we all have our own perceptions and ideas about what is even carbon removal and marine CDR, right? So that's why I asked all the panelists to give me their salty takes and cold data. And I have gathered all of their statements. But before we dive into that, I also want all the people in the room to interact with us and tell me which headline challenge feels more urgent in marine CDR today. So you have 4 options: MRV certainty, ecosystem impact, cost curve, and policy ask. Looks like the winner now is MRV certainty. No one voted for policy. How do you see that, right? Now we have the salty takes from all of our 3 wonderful technical and scientist community panelists. And the first part is about what is marine CDR, which Alicia has already walked us through. But then these statements, I'm just going to read it, and then I will pass on to the panelists who gave me these statements. Number 1 is marine carbon removal means ocean alkalinity enhancement only or ocean fertilization only. That's a mouthful. And that's coming from our wonderful Sophie here. I'll pass on to you.
Okay, sure. So I submitted this before I knew that Alicia was going to take us through all of these wonderful summaries of all the techniques. But something when I speak to people who are maybe new in the space is that they're lumping all marine carbon removal techniques together, which is partially correct. As Alicia said, all carbon removal techniques that work in the ocean pretty much all work to reduce the amount of CO2 in the surface ocean and then prompt more uptake. But there's a huge range in terms of durability, for example, with some of the biotic approaches like macroalgal cultivation compared to ocean alkalinity enhancement, which is storage via bicarbonate ion, which is a chemical technique. So I guess this was kind of like a myth busting thing that there's a huge range of techniques out there and actually there's pros, cons to all of them. So something to bear in mind for particularly newcomers to the space.
That's great. That ties into our second statement, which is the salty take or the myth. MCDR will harm ecosystems. I think that one is coming from, it's either Alicia or Grace.
I think I said that one. Yeah, that was one of the ones I said. So again, this assumption that I think is really top of mind for a lot of folks for good reason, that MCDR will necessarily harm ecosystems. This is what I would say is a myth, and I'll give you kind of a number of reasons why it's a good thing to be concerned about, but it's also something that there's a lot of folks thinking about it, and there's no reason to think at this point that it's necessarily the case. So, MCDR will harm ecosystems comes from this idea that if we are putting things like alkalinity in the ocean or operating processes like direct ocean removal in the ocean, that there will necessarily be ecosystem harm. There is a lot of work actually happening in the academic space. There's some big publications and special issue journals, which are looking at these questions about whether or not enhanced alkalinity does make a big, any sort of measurable impact on ecosystems. And the results of some of the most of early trials is that there are no big red flags around this issue. So there's really a kind of a green light to move on to kind of the next wave of trials around ecosystems. So the science really does not back the idea that MCDR will necessarily harm ecosystems. Another reason to be less concerned about this has to do with the idea that most MCDR projects, they are operating underneath existing permits that are already governing ocean health in some way in coastal environments. And so they are already under some form of regulation, which then limits their ability to harm ecosystems. The third reason is that most perturbations through ocean alkalinity enhancement are exceptionally small changes to the background ocean chemistry or the background ocean biology. Orders of magnitude smaller, except in the very, very local vicinity of deployment. So I think that this is something that we're going to continue to look at as scientists and practitioners, but it's a myth right now, I'd say.
Great. I can see that it's myth because people are already taking notes. And then it ties to the next statement. So social license to operate in the ocean is going to be an issue for MCDR. I think that's submitted by Grace.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, this is something I've heard a lot is concern around basically NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard, that that communities, holders generally are going to be hesitant to implement new technologies in the ocean. And I think there's a lot of, reason why people are skeptical of that. I mean, we just have to look at public perceptions around things like offshore wind, right? To understand where those concerns are coming from. But I think it's important to sort of level set on where we are today and whether or not this is proving out in the context of marine CDR. And the state of, the field right now is that there are dozens of projects already concluded, currently operational and permitted and kicking off shortly around the world, right? So we think of this as a really nascent field, and it is, but it's happening. It's happening right now. It's happening. There are projects in North America, Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific as well. So this is happening globally. And I think one of the interesting data points when it comes to stakeholder engagement and community engagement and social license is that I think one of the reasons people haven't heard of these dozens of projects that are happening around the world is that they haven't really been newsworthy. There have been a couple projects that have received community pushback, and those have made headlines. And I think they're fueling some of the ideas that there is going to be concerns around social license. But the reality is the vast majority of those dozens of projects have been implemented successfully and with the support of local communities. And so I think this is just something, when we actually look at the numbers, people are supportive of.
Great. We're moving on to the topic of the day, people's most interest topic of MRV. The first one is submitted by Alicia. Is we just need better sensors.
Yeah, this is a good one, although I'm looking at the other salty takes and realizing that it would be actually interesting to go to the first one, the second one, which I'm wondering if it's Grace. It might be helpful to start with those ones, and then I think my salty take will mean a little bit.
Okay, it's Grace.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one and the third one, honestly, are probably saying similar things. And Sophie, maybe the third one came from you. But I mean, yeah, one of the sort of this was that, I mean, and it got actually reflected in the poll, right, when we started, right? Some of the biggest uncertainty is around MRV certainty. And I think right now I would say that there is, yeah, certainly an idea that it's difficult to quantify carbon removal for MCDR. My take on this is that there has been tremendous progress on this in the past few years. Like, we are light years ahead of where we were even 2 years ago. Today, there are certified MRV methodologies. There are companies selling carbon credits based on those methodologies. So if we can tell you more about that. But I mean, we have come leaps and bounds. And I think particularly when you actually stack it up against some of the land-based technologies, MRV for marine CDR, at least for some of these technologies, and I'll emphasize probably more of the chemistry pathways that Alicia talked about, they're holding their own, and they're certainly meeting industry standards. So I think this is something that it's just evolved so quickly. Our ability to quantify carbon removal, that sort of our general understanding of MRV here is just it hasn't kept up.
Yeah, I think whether Alicia or Sophie want to go next, because one is we just need better sensors, and the other is it's impossible to quantify marine carbon removal. Yeah, maybe Sophie will go next. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, happy to go next. So building on what Grace said, could not agree more. We've come a really long way. When I first started working on like research to do with ocean alkalinity enhancement, it was, yeah, as I kind of mentioned, like this slightly wacky idea, and people really didn't have a good handle on how exactly we would quantify it. We have come a really long way. There's a huge amount of effort in both the observational but also the modelling community to make sure that we have well-validated modelling assets. So a lot of the great work that Seaworthy are doing as well. Just shout out for your work, Alicia, with your team. And I guess one of the things that I get asked a lot is how can we have confidence in modelling for quantification? And that's like one of the things I think that's a myth that people can't necessarily get their head around initially, and think it's impossible to quantify because we have to rely on models, quote unquote. I guess my big picture thing that people need to realize with marine science is that the reason we know so much about the ocean is because it operates over really vast spatial and temporal scales. So measurements are actually like incredibly crucial, but the reason we know so much about the ocean is because we've been able to utilize modeling assets, and it's going to be the same for quantifying carbon removal. So there's going to have to be this, because of the scales, both spatial and temporal, on which we're operating, it's going to be necessary to use this combination of measurement in the near field but then modeling in the far field once, as Alicia mentioned, the signal of alkalinity, for example, if we're talking about that technique, has diluted. So I think one of the things that I want people to take away is that it's possible to do rigorous quantification as long as you couple high quality measurements with well-validated peer-reviewed modelling assets. So I'll pass over to Alicia.
Yeah, thanks. Building on what Grace and Sophie said, the salient point here that I'm making is the term just. Because of course we do need better sensors in general to do better MRV that in the ocean. That's absolutely true. But if we also have, you can think of a whole toolkit of things that we use in terms of the quantification of carbon removal and environmental safety for MCDR. And in that toolkit is both sensors, and we need better sensors, and then also models. And these tools are ones, and I think this is an important point, you just heard it already, are ones which are already at the point where they are able to do functional MRV, to the point where there are protocols and scientists are using these technologies as they exist right now. And at the same time, organizations like ours, like Hourglass, which is Grace organizations, and folks within the academic community are continually working on the development of both better sensors and better platforms for sensors in the ocean, and improving the processes within models. So these are all parts of both being able to do MRV now as it stands and advancing that into the future to make that even more reliable.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for our scientists and engineers in the room to teach us about everything in marine CDR. And now we're going to listen to people who have money, which is our investor here, to tell us about some cold facts and data about venture activities in marine CDR.
So while kind of we've heard my colleagues talking about the progress, the tremendous progress that has been made over the last 2 years in terms of MRB and winning, I guess, regulators and society. I think in terms of investments, I think the numbers are still quite low. There is quite, I would say, much smaller number of companies looking to develop technologies to remove carbon from oceans or from sea or from other kind of sources of water versus, for example, direct air capture or bioenergy with captured carbon and storage. So other kind of carbon removal pathways. So that's what's happening now, and there might be different reasons underlying that. And part of that, it might have to do with some of the myths which have been debunked in this room, but they might still be in the heads of people who need to be better educated and engaged with, scientists and organizations actually working on science. And it also could be down to the technology itself being relatively new. Direct air capture has been around for quite a while. Point source capture has been for even longer. I think ocean carbon capture is relatively new, but it's catching up with the rest of carbon removal pathways. Just to mention that things are looking up anyway. So despite, the difficult climate, in general, I think in many ways influenced by the kind of changes in the US policies. Despite this kind of climate, there have been quite a few deals in ocean carbon capture universe. So there have been quite a few companies who have raised significant, for their stage of maturity, amount of money. Quite a few of these companies are now at the valuation close to 100 million euros. So it's not a small valuation, and very well backed by different types of venture capital organizations and corporates. Now I'm giving commentary.
I guess I come in more from the bank's perspective, and so that's less an investment and more of a how do we finance, think of loans and this type of debt in general. I think there is, in some way, it's a truth, but it's also a myth that when we think CDR, we think there's more money into it, it's more financeable, it's developing faster. And some element of that is true. I think that there is clearly very strong science. There is a general willingness, and you can see the market sentiment being more positive towards CDRs in general, and the use case for them is much clearer. That being said, as a bank, we very often see that project developers, founders of those companies that have successfully raised funding really just consider the funds it takes to put the project in place, but they don't consider operational costs and just the overall cost of running a company sustainably, of actually being able to scale, take leverage, take debt. And those are all concepts that, I fully understand are not necessarily something that as a scientist you you think of in the first place, but they do make it challenging to get to that next step of not just getting equity or concessional funding, but actually being able to grow and scale further. The other one, and that's something that I'm sure Paul will be very happy for me to say, that is that when it comes to scaling, when it comes to getting further equity, but also further debt into your project, there is very little right now that can happen without insurance. It's not just for carbon. Generally speaking, insurance is everywhere. But when it comes to carbon projects, even CDRs, with all the science and all the advances that are coming there, when you go to, venture capital usually has a bit more of a risk appetite, but when you go to a bank to get a loan, they don't know how this works. There might be tons and tons of science about how it works, but they don't know. There's also, even if the science is there, there isn't enough of a track record to really know. Having the science and knowing how it works isn't necessarily exactly the same as being able to implement it without any unforeseeable issues, hurdles coming through, right? And so the fact is, you will really struggle to convince any investor in any bank that for sure your forecast will be accurate. Like if I ask you, can you ensure me 100%, put your heart and money on the table that everything you tell me that will happen, there won't be some event that you couldn't plan for. And that is why insurance is there. If you want to get that backing, that more conventional backing beyond just angel financing, venture financing, and being able to build further, insurance is crucial. And being able to explain what you're doing and to get the backing of insurance companies that understand what you're doing is very important.
Yeah, I think it's very rare, and I'm extremely lucky to have all these great people with me today in one panel, because I really wanted to bring the voice, not just in the science and climate community, not just as a VC angle, not just in a banking angle, like everyone in the same room. So you actually can figure out what is the best climate tech funding model. My background is also in structured finance. I spent 7 years in investment bank doing capital market solutions in Standard Chartered. My previous boss, he used to say, he said, Lydia, every risk has a price. So everything can be priced, and everything technically, if you structure it well, can be bankable. Now, it's not to say everyone should go to like Audrey, but then I'm just saying, because I really want the climate community, the more conversations we have like this, the better we'll be able to understand what is needed, what's needed at the right time for it to go to the right people. At the beginning, you might not even go to a bank. You maybe go to like a credit fund or like a more higher risk tolerance investor. But then all the things that you need to consider is on the table. That's why we have our breakout session. But before our breakout session, we also have this one interactive question for you. What is the one thing that stood out to you from this panel? Quality speakers and high-level content. Thank you. The gigaton potential of MCDR. MRV isn't as difficult as it seems, but MCDR still lacks growth in comparison with other CDR methods. Let's see what we can get from the grouping. Marine techniques, MRV challenges, speaker diversity, investment potential. Great. That's what we want to have of this kind of panel. And then now we are going to go to very exciting breakout session. So for the breakout session, each of you have picked a different type of name tag. According to the color, you're a climate skeptic, first timer, tech tinkerer, funding for good, climate optimist. And now we have 4 tables, but I think if we can kindly ask the 2 gentlemen at the back, move here. So we have 4 to 5 people in the same group. And we're going to do this basically mini task together is, if you are building a marine CDR startup and you have just raised 1 million seed to build a marine CDR startup, decide your first 3 moves in the below 3 category: CapEx and build, science and MRV, market and customers. We'll give you 10 minutes. And then you can write one sticky note for each move and choose one spokesperson and post the sticky notes on the whiteboard and then take a selfie together as a group. The panelists can join however you want. This is for you to spark the conversation, not for you to finish the whole thing. Because everyone is interested in MRV, and I have a podcast. It's called Bite-Size Climate Tech. This is episode 1 of season 4, and I interview Alan Adams, who is the founder and CEO of Aquatic Labs, and they're a U.S. company focused on marine CDR removal. This is just a trailer of episode 1.
I was very happy as a professor of theoretical physics, and then I had a kid. A company that sequesters carbon in the ocean is making gold. It's a carbon offset. It's an asset that they can sell. The problem is that gold is invisible. Sensor fusion is the idea that to measure something that you care about. So our job is to make that gold visible. The tool that we've built is a sensor that measures the alkalinity in the water. We measure lots of different chemical parameters and use that to understand more precisely than any one measurement could. Imagine you've got a Marvel superhero, right? And they have some amazing thing. They can see through walls, but maybe they can't hear anything. But you get a team of superheroes together. They can see what's on the other side of the wall. They can also feel what's on the other side of the wall. And having lots of superpowers is more than just having one. And that's what sensor fusion is all about. I'll tell you the thing that makes me most hopeful right now.
Let's make climate cool again. Let's make climate cool again.
5. Stand by. You're listening to Bite-Size Climate Tech. We're going to ask each group to share their sticker. Can I maybe get a representative here who wants to share?
We haven't got a sticker.
We kind of do have the first one. I don't need the mic.
Come here in front of the camera.
I don't really want the mic. We debated for quite a long time. Our whole point was that we wanted to leverage networks. So we were thinking about how we could use a $1 million seed funding and how we could use that to sort of like work with like other partners and work with other people to be able to expand quickly. So we discussed about how with that we wouldn't explore not looking at or having our own pilot project using existing academic research, existing pilot projects, and partnering up with other people was the main way of how we could do this. The same with science and MRV, so partnering up with existing pathways, existing networks, and trying to basically like use other people's ideas and expand on that. And then a lot of the time would be to try and focus on market and customers to prove the concept so that we could then secure more funding and go elsewhere. There was also quite a big debate around like focusing on voluntary markets or focusing on carbon utilization as an additional revenue source instead of just selling CDR credits, which that sort of like took up quite a lot of our time trying to decide which side to focus on, and it was undecided.
Great, let's pass on to the second group.
Yeah. All right, so we started discussing like robots for planting seagrass fields, but then one thing we thought about is that I think we're aware that some of those projects take a long time to get off the ground because you need permits. And we need to piggyback on existing projects. So we kind of pivoted to, we're going to work on underwater drones for MRV. And I think the panel spoke about there being a bit of a gap in MRV around sort of, the platforms for deploying those kind of sensors. In terms of the CapEx build move, we're going to be spending our money on building a prototype of that underwater drone. A lot of that money is going to go on engineers. They're going to have to do all the R&D, and we're going to probably have to find like a pilot site to test the robot. Cost some money, and obviously all the usual good stuff like in a startup, like nice t-shirts with the company logo. And in terms of the market and customers, so I think obviously marine CDR projects is one market segment. Obviously that's quite nascent and not a huge market yet. We also thought about the buyers of the carbon credits from those projects, who may need validation of sort of what is being done on those projects. And then there are other sort of existing commercial use cases. So there might be applications in things like shipping, in the offshore energy sector, maybe NGOs as well. who might be interested in the data that these kind of underwater drones could collect. So yeah, that's what we came up with.
Thank you.
Hello, because it's a Women in Carbon event, women should speak now. So our plan is actually quite similar, as we already heard. So we want to do like a seaweed farm as well. And so what we would do with so for the £1 million, we would actually use it for a pilot plant to set it up in the ocean. We also would use it for the permits. And also we would develop like a business plan for it and also actually have a look at different revenue streams. So you want to sell carbon removal credits, but also, for example, you could sell like seaweed to cows also, because this could also like kind of reduce the methane emissions for cows, which is quite important as well. But also people quite like to eat seaweed as well nowadays. So there are like different revenue streams we also would like to actually explore. That's all.
Sticker here. These are all the sticker notes that we collect. And then now can I invite all the panelists back to their seats? I'm so happy that everyone enjoyed the session because we're running behind time. So I'm going to ask our panelists to be super short on this. It's a reality check because now what it actually takes to start in marine CDR. And everyone would just tell me only one sentence of one non-negotiable, one underestimate hurdle, and one ask. We'll start from Grace.
Okay, rapid fire. One non-negotiable. I think today, MCDR is not at sort of plug and play level. So if someone were interested in getting into this space and founding, find a co-founder. If you're coming in with an MBA, go find a CTO who can bring, a unique proposition and IP. And if you're a CTO, go find someone with that MBA. Right now, we really still need both to push the field forward. One hurdle, I think this was already touched on based on your guys' feedback in that last session, but don't underestimate permitting. Permitting, I think, is probably one of the biggest challenges to marine CDR, and specifically just the timeline. Best case takes a year to get a permit. More realistically, you're looking at 2, so start early. And one ask, include MCDR in your portfolio if you're a funder or a policymaker. If you're not, you're missing out on basically the biggest potential carbon storage reservoir we have on Earth.
Yeah. Next one is Sophie.
Okay, so I have a temptation to pick some different things from what I came prepared with, but I actually think it's somewhat useful to say that I actually was going to say some pretty similar things to Grace, because I think it highlights how important these things are if we've independently come to that conclusion beforehand. So slightly different flavor, but non-negotiable for me is if you're looking to found a company, you absolutely need to find ways to get plugged into the academic community and the research space that's working independently. So don't kind of go it alone. Make sure that you're making sure you partner with good due diligencing experts who can give you an independent opinion. Make sure you're tapping into the vast network of research and academic activity in the space to make sure that you're doing things the right way. Hurdle for me, I was going to talk about permitting. So thank you, Grace, for already talking about that. It can take a really long time and it can be difficult. There are ways I think that we can think as a community on how to make this smoother, but for now it's a tricky one. And the ask for me is, again, similar, but I was going to highlight in particular the policy side of this. So there's some noises at the moment that marine carbon removal techniques might not get included in some of the kind of broader scale IPC kind of portfolio stuff that's happening there, and a couple of other developments in the space where even abiotics, so the kind of more chemical approaches to marine CDR, might not get included as something that countries could use as part of their nationally defined contributions. And I think it would be a real shame for the space if that happened, because it would kind of almost stop things before they can get started, because people would have a skewed perspective on how much the potential of these techniques is. So that's it from me.
Next one is Ollie.
Probably I will repeat some of this. So non-negotiable, I think, might be quite different. I think it's because it has to do with ocean, it has to do with ecosystem, whether it's biological pathway or chemical pathway. I think it's quite important to have an environmental scientist on the team. Someone who is very well plugged into scientific community, kind of ideally, stays very well connected with a number of universities looking at this and different types of organizations like Alicia's and Grace. So that's kind of non-negotiable from my side. In terms of the hurdle, I will repeat permitting and also moving from lab scale, kind of lab bench pilot for chemical pathways to first sort of like pilots in their real world environment. And then next stage, lots of companies underestimate it. They kind of make promises that it's going to be like, I don't know, 2 years and then another 2 years, but it turns out to be quite, it's going to take, most likely it's going to take much longer, and it's going to take more money as well. So kind of that can't be underestimated as well, because, chemical pathways, they're quite complicated in terms of the chemistry, and moving from, I don't know, like one cell electrolyzer to a multiple cell stack electrolyzer is already quite a journey. And the ask, yes, will be to policymakers to include, marine CDRs into ETS. At the moment, there is kind of a view that they will join ETS later. But from what we've heard today, there is no kind of reasons why it shouldn't happen earlier. I think it's all down to education and engagement with the right authorities and policymakers.
Great, that's the reason why we have everyone here. The next one is our banker.
So I guess, in some ways, it's good that we repeat a few of the same themes, because it does confirm that those are the things that they really need to focus on. The non-negotiable for me, and maybe I'm bundling it a bit more, but is quality, robustness. You need to make sure that no one can really pick on your approach and how scientific it is, how robust it is, how you're measuring it, and how you are indeed keeping on top of the latest developments and how you incorporate that into your thinking. This market just cannot afford to have yet another scandal of people who are just cutting corners. So that's, to me, the non-negotiable. You need to be robust, transparent in your approach. Yeah. The big hurdle, as somebody mentioned, you need an MBA in your team. Don't think just about the science. I guess it's do think about your business plan. How do you make sure everything does add up economically? You can make it happen, because the money will not keep flowing if you don't have a clear line of sight on what your costs, what your requirements are, and where you're going with it. So do make sure that you keep a close eye on that. The ask, it's also a warning, is do keep track of the use case. What are you doing this for? Don't try and create a solution for a problem that nobody really cares about. Whether it's the carbon credit, the CDR, whether it is the side products, but you need to make sure that there is appetite for the solution you're providing, whether it's policy driven or corporate world driven, but make sure that this is happening. Otherwise, you're just going into a rabbit hole.
Yeah, finally, is Alicia is going to sum up this session for us.
Thank you. Non-negotiable for me, one of the things that, and again, my background is as an academic and moving into this space, which is that this concept of practice and actually doing real world deployments. So I think there has been some thinking within the academic community, so that may be outside of who's in the room here, around this concept of wait for the science to mature. And what we see instead is that there is a huge value in moving ahead in terms of learning about how to do the MRV from a deployment perspective, building out supply chains, starting to have these bigger conversations. So again, this sort of the non-negotiable to me is like, we have to actually walk forward down this path in order to make it happen and make it a reality. I think a hurdle that I hear a lot about is actually around the funding. I think that this I'm so happy that we have folks in the room who are from the conventional banking space to help us understand What are some of the things that have to come into being in order to make these things bankable by sort of more conventional finance methods? So I think that's a wonderful hurdle, a hurdle we have, but also it turns into this ask that I have. So Lydia and I have been talking now for months about having more events like this where we're bringing into the room folks who are from the practitioner space, from the academic space, and then also from the funding model space. And my ask is that we have more of these conversations where we're sort of trying to cross these different sectors, and that we are spending those moments that we have together trying to find the common ground and trying to speak each other's language so we can get more comfortable collectively with the different pieces and aspects of this problem.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I want to mention that Alicia is actually based in Colorado, US, so she woke up at 7 to join this conversation with us. And this is exactly why I have this conversation, and we'll have the next one in June. But we're not done yet. Now we are going to go to the interactive. It's like which single hurdle felt most underestimated from the people in the room? Permitting, permit issues, timeline. What is the use case? Time. Looks like permitting, timeline, and business case is the 3 biggest. Next one, we're coming into our second breakout session. This is going to be really, really quick. Is each one of you have your fruits. And this time I want you to find your fruit buddies. Find the same fruit buddies. And then we have 2 whiteboards at the back, which you're just going to write down. There's no discussion. Just write down this: trust trigger and deal breaker. Trust trigger on the left-hand side, deal breaker on the right-hand side is what would it take for you personally to believe in the marine CDR projects enough to fund it, support it, or advocate for it? So then if you can find your fruit buddies and then just to write it there, we have 5 minutes. I was going to say this is one final bit, is one piece of news. We'll start from Alicia and Grace.
Oh, sorry, I didn't prepare an exciting piece of news, but I'll just throw one out there. So at our organization, we build modeling tools. We also put out data sets that are free and open to the community of folks, which include researchers and also folks who are in the commercial industry. And we have data sets that basically map the global ocean in terms of areas where ocean alkalinity enhancement and direct ocean removal can be most efficient and effective at actually removing carbon dioxide removal. We have put out our ocean alkalinity enhancement, we call it our Atlas data set, about a year ago, and we're about to launch our direct ocean removal Atlas data set. So if any folks are interested in seeing what that data set looks like, we actually have an interactive GUI that we worked on with a group called Carbon Plan to produce. Please reach out to me and I'm happy to walk you through that. Thanks.
Great, Grace.
Yeah, something that Hourglass will be launching in about a month from now. We have been working on a framework and an accompanying web tool that helps project developers assess environmental risk from proposed projects. And so we're putting it out there as a way to try and lower the bar to high quality environmental risk assessment for projects to be used for both project planning in the permitting process and then also embedded into MRV methodologies. So we can get quantitative and confident that these projects really are not having negative environmental impacts. So that's, like I said, coming in about a month from now and will be open source, freely available online.
Thank you. Before I switch over to the panelists in the room, this is just one question you always wanted to ask about marine CDR. So if people in the room wanted to type in their questions, they can do it in the meantime. And then I'll pass Olia here to share one piece of exciting news with us.
I think one piece of exciting news actually for me was that, I've learned so much from my colleagues in science. And, as an investor, I feel actually more comfortable about marine CDR than I felt before. And very much looking forward to making our first investment into the space.
Great. That's the reason why we have these kind of conversations. And Sophie.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. Super exciting to hear that, Olia, as well. That's the whole point of this kind of event. I guess from me, isometric, this time last year, we only had one MRV protocol. So that was for ocean alkalinity enhancement. And now we have 4. So that covers like wastewater alkalinity enhancement, river alkalinity enhancement, and some electrolytic approaches as well. and we're going to be releasing more this year. So keep an eye out, and we will be issuing our first marine carbon removal credits within the coming months as well. So we invite everybody to take a look at those. We're really excited about the level of rigor and transparency we're hopefully going to bring to learning through doing in the space. I will pass to Audrey.
I feel we should have finished with this, actually. I guess my good news is maybe not quite as tangible. I mean, Stenchard, the bank I work with, I think we've been doing all those research papers actually more and more around ocean and blue economy, and it's 80% of the markets we're operating that are coastal and that are directly impacted by this. I guess the good news is that we are doing good work internally to get more awareness and to get more willingness to support not just marine CDR, but adaptation and other underfunded activities around marine spaces, blue economy, and just ocean in general to help us get for the future.
There's some very good questions on the screen. Because of the time limit, we'll just pick one. I will pick one. I personally really wanted to know what's the lowest potential cost it could reach per ton of CO2 removed. I don't think everyone has a crystal ball to say that, but maybe it's a question for scientists in the room. Alicia or Grace, Sophie.
I'll take a stab at the reasons why it's hard to tell. So things like ocean alkalinity enhancement have been projected to be quite low in terms of costs. So costs that are lower than $100 per ton. I would say again that these are just sort of wild projections that have been made and ended up in various reports. A couple things about what is controlling some of those costs. A lot of that actually has to do not with something inherent in these methods, but with things like the supply chains that are needed, things like energy availability. So these are the pieces about in terms of reducing the cost. They really have to do with getting out there and doing these projects in practice to bring down some of those operational costs.
Thank you. We're summarizing the questions.
While we're waiting, I'll just add, I think the estimates of $100 per ton that Alicia just spoke to, that's right. I wouldn't characterize it as a wild guess, to be honest. Personally worked on some of those for the technologies I've been thinking about. There's obviously supply chain uncertainties, that's everywhere. But I do really think sub $100 per ton is definitely possible.
Great. $100 is the target for most of the CDR methods that can actually scale, right? So I think hopefully we'll see that day coming very soon. And then next one is drop your aha or most surprising insight from this conversation. There's one response. The MRV for marine CDR is more developed than assumed. Great. It serves the purpose of this conversation. Everyone has a question about MRV, and now that you can do OAE for $100 per ton CO2. Wastewater applications makes total sense, but wasn't obvious to me as a pathway. MRV, the ocean might be the most pivotal platform for CDR. Yay. How critical insurance will be. Yeah. Shout out to Kita. Awesome. In one word, how would you describe your feeling about marine CDR now? Excited. Better. Excited again. Confident. Well, I'm happy that people are excited now about marine CDR. I heard this one sentence recently from a podcast. They say that ocean is the new space in terms of space tech. So all the most exciting and yet to be explored technology or maybe solutions is actually in the ocean. Well, I also want to mention that CDR is not just one technology or one pathway. Same as in marine, all the other carbon removal technology and pathway has its pros and cons. And I'm dedicated to do these kind of conversations to break the silo going on. The next one will be in London Climate Action Week at the end of June. And then what's one thing giving you hope in climate right now, please? Give me some hope. New innovation, ocean gaining prominence, new innovation, new solutions. The people. Yes, passionate people. People are carefully choosing the words. We'll jump into both first. Yeah, we've reached to the giveaway time. Exciting. I'm not natural in like hosting events, or I'm not a born extrovert myself. But the reason why I can do this kind of events is because one book is called 2-Hour Cocktail Party. And the author of the book called Nick Gray, he's a brilliant guy. He has sold his business of helping people to touring about museums. And he gave some of his books to me. And then, so now today I have 2 giveaway. And maybe I'll get one of the panelists to draw. You can draw one from here. Okay. You're closest to me. Okay, let's see who that is. Yeah.
Okay. Adam. Is Adam still here? Possibly not.
Let's
go again. Henry.
Henry is not here.
Also, to the point of Women in Carbon event, where are the women's names? Okay. Frederica.
Yeah. The books are kept, I think, outside. They're coming. And then, to thank our sponsors, so Paul will also draw one.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So if you also want to host an event, I just need to give a shout out to the great, brilliant book. You can reach out to Nick at nick@party.pro, which is also indicated in the book. I also want to give a shout out to the sponsor of the Fruitful Moment today. They are a marine CDR company called Aeon Blue, and they can produce, if I remember correctly, like salve and all those kind of great stuff. A company based in Canada. So they kindly sponsor all the fruits today and our Fruitful Moments. Yeah, and then that's about it of today. I want to thank Alicia and Grace for staying on the call for so long. If you want to just share one sentence of hope or anything at the end.
I'll go. Well, one, I just want to say thank you, Lydia, for planning this great event. I think we need more of these, and these kinds of events give me hope that we can continue to make progress in what I think is an incredibly promising field. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep, same thing. Totally agree. I just love this type of event. I hope we can have more of them.
Yeah, we'll have more of them, including everyone in the room to co-creating this with us. And we'll let the remote panelists get on your day. Thank you very much. And then people in the room, we're just going to take a selfie.
Let's make climate cool again.